the Celtics are off to a hot start. They already were able to trade for Malcom Brogdon, which there were a few players that they had to give up that bench that Gary has been talking about over the last few weeks. They were given up for the most part in exchange for an additional piece in Brogdon. What were your two reactions to that trade?
I think it was a good deal for the Celtics. I think Brogdon's a good player. He's got some durability issues now. What's going to happen with him and Smart, I think we'll figure that out. But I also think it was good for them to get rid of some of the guys, the dead weight on the bench. Unfortunately, the Daniel Tice, that didn't work out as well as I think we all thought. His his comeback, and it got to the point with a different coach. Ime didn't want to, didn't trust him in the playoffs. He wasn't that reliable third big. Aaron Nesmith, it sounded good when they drafted him, and the whole I'm the best shooter in the draft, quote unquote. It never worked out for him, and so I just think he needed a new environment, a new place to play, some place that that he can play and just make all of his mistakes. It wasn't going to happen in Boston, and I think his lack of development hurt the Celtics greatly. I think with their bench, they never had that shooter. They never were able to get that shooter. So I just think it was good to get, to move on, and obviously Brad doesn't have the patience with draft picks that Danny does. And I think that that's in many ways a good thing. These teams ain't going to put you on the bench for 3 or 4 years anymore and let you develop. Yeah, I just think throwing Nesmith, and obviously he still has tradable value. I mean, for Indiana, it's a young team. It's rebuilding. He can play with a bunch of young guys, bond with a bunch of young guys, and be in an environment where everything isn't, well, go out there and hit 2 or 3 threes. If not, you're going to be back on the bench. So, I said, Juwan Morgan and Leak Fitz, nice guys, and Stauskas that clears the bench. But for me, I made a mistake earlier. I'm looking at a contract like Brogdon's signed for a couple more years. So I think that's good. Like, you have him on your payroll, you have Derek White on your payroll. So this is long-term movement, and we'll see what happens with him and Smart and who's going to start and where Brogdon's going to play. But remember, durability has always been an issue with Brogdon. He's not a 80 or 75 game a year guy. He's more like a 50 or 60 game a year guy. So let's see if he can keep healthy, if he enters camp completely healthy after missing a good part of last year. But it sounds like, he's a guy who's mature. He can create his own shot. He can hit the three. He hit 38%, I want to say, from three cup last year. I'm not going off last year. He struggled. But I think for him, it's a good move for him to rebuild, and it's a good move for the Celtics to get that reliable, steady ball handler.
Yeah, they're adding a guy who is going to be in their regular rotation and at sometimes will be a starter, depending on injuries and things like that. And it costs them the guys at the end of the bench who weren't going to play.
Which was technically nothing. They
literally got a rotation guy without having to get rid of anyone in the rotation by getting rid of the guys at the end of the bench that weren't going to play.
Yeah.
Danny Ainge has done his hustles in the past, but Brad Stevens is coming out like, hold my beer. Let me show you how this is done. This was an incredible deal simply because of the talent that they got in return. And the points that Gary's made about his injury-riddled history, very legit and valid. But the role that he will be asked to play in Boston will allow them to have a certain amount of load management without really calling it load management, because you're going to have a point guard rotation of sorts where you've got Smart, Derek White's probably going to get some minutes there, and Brogdon will as well. If Brogdon is in that mix, he's probably looking at the 20, 25 minutes per game range, which for him is a great thing. That's the best way to keep him as healthy and as durable as possible. And for the Celtics, this puts them in a pole position to run it back and get back to the finals. They went into this offseason needing a stretch big, a playmaker, and maybe someone who could knock down 3-point shots. They have already addressed 2 out of those 3 in the first month of the offseason. We'll talk about the stretch big a little bit later. But Brogdon is a great fit. And to Gary's point, when he came in for his workout with the Celtics, you felt like you were talking to the next president of the United States. He's got that type of presence about him, that type of leadership about him. And speaking of leadership, when you think about him, you think about Grant Williams, you think about Jaylen Brown, all of whom have active roles within the Players Association. So you've got a different kind of leadership that you're developing, not only in terms of off the court, but I think you're going to see it on the court. Because now, Brad has already done the daycare thing. He's not trying to do that to Ime. Brad has already tended the kids and made sure that they get their sippy cups and they get their minutes and go all that stuff when he's dealing with all these young bucks and kids who just are out there, ain't ready to really help you win games. Brad's like, I'm not going to do that to Ime. I'm going to get him with some guys who can not only play, but guys who are under contract so that Ime ain't got to worry next year, oh my God, I'm losing like half of my rotation. Mm-hmm. Brad is coming out looking like that dude as a GM. As good as people thought Brad was as a coach, he's better as a GM. He's off to a better start as a GM than he was as a coach. And he was pretty good. He was pretty good. I mean, the guy finished, fourth all-time in wins for Celtics head coach. But what he's been able to do as a GM, way more impressive than what he did as a coach.
And one more thing on Brogdon, you mentioned the experience being a big aspect of this roster, the maturity level that's there. He spent 3 seasons in Milwaukee, 3 seasons in Indy. What do you think that experience overall is going to, I think, help translate to this Celtics roster, if it can at all?
Well, I think with Malcom, you've got a guy who has been at a couple of different spots, and there's always a bit of knowledge that you take from all those places. And the big thing about him that I appreciate is that he's a leader, he's a competitor, and he has a level of familiarity with a couple of Celtics that will help. I mean, when you think back a couple of years ago when Jaylen Brown is actively involved in social protests, look who's right with him, Malcom Brogdon. That you can't underestimate or undervalue the importance of having a certain level of familiarity with the core guys that you're joining forces with. I guarantee you that him and Jaylen have had at least one conversation since all this went down, because that's what they do. And again, the thing about Malcom that I love is that he's a grown-ass man out there. I mean, he may not be the biggest guy, he may not be the strongest guy, but you got a guy who's smart, intelligent, is going to make the right decision more times than not. And the only real knock on him is he hasn't been healthy. He hasn't really been healthy since basically his first couple of years in the league, which, by the way, he won Rookie of the Year, the first second-round pick to do that ever. So you are getting a guy who can ball, who's experienced, familiar with your core guys, and should put you in a pole position to get back to the NBA Finals. Because I think right now, if the season began right now, the Celtics would be the odds-on favorite to come out of the East.
Yeah. Another transaction that came up from free agency so far is Gallinari getting picked off of waivers from Atlanta. How do you think he'll impact this Celtics roster?
Danny Ainge is probably thinking like, damn, I've been trying to get him to Boston all these damn years, and now I'll even get him. They have loved that dude for the longest time. And he's a 6'9", 6'10" stretch big. He's knocked down threes. He's a scorer. That is what he does. He gets buckets. Now, defensively, that's going to be interesting. I think that's going to be the big challenge that Ime is going to have with figuring out the best way to utilize him. Would not be surprised if you saw him on the floor a lot with Rob, because if Rob is playing that free safety, that gives Gallinari a little bit of a safety net to frankly not suck defensively, and it hurt the team. But I love the addition, especially, again, you're getting a guy for pennies on the dollar. Your rotation that got you all the way to the NBA Finals, you didn't have to touch that, and you addressed 2 out of your 3 biggest needs.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I like Gallinari a lot. I think he's a good scorer.
But
no, there's no but to it. I just want he needs to be in certain roles. The thing that impressed me the most is he can shoot over other players. Like, he uses his height and his girth to be able to score. It's not just a 3-point shooter, but he can shoot the 3. Obviously, I was there, and that night in Atlanta, he hit 10 threes against the Celtics, which might have been one of the low points of that one season, last season, not last season, but the season before last, when I was thinking that Brad might be fired after that game, that Atlanta game, where Gallinari was just looking like Steph. So he's a 39% career 3-point shooter. He's a strong offensive player. And I think defensively, he's not stopper by any means, but he can use his size. He's 33, 34. He can use the elements that he has to provide resistance. That's all you want. You don't want, he's not going to be a defensive stopper. He's not going to be someone who is, going to shut down anybody, but just draw a damn charge, get a block, get a couple of rebounds, things that, guys who aren't great defenders do to stay on the floor. I think that's not asking too much from him. I think it's a good addition. I would like to see another wing who can play a little bit D, a little 3-and-D guy, maybe with that minimum slot, because they got some slots to fill. And I'm sure they're going to probably use Summer League and look at some guys who are playing in Summer League.